All right. Hello. Welcome to the Dr. Kirsten Show. I'm your host, Dr. Kirsten Lauritsen. And today I have a guest with me, Laura Sinclair. We're going to talk all about motherhood and being an entrepreneur in business and all of the things. How do you do both? I know many of you know my background as far as lots of my concerns as far as having a business and how was that going to work with having a kid and all of those things. So I'm so excited to get to have this conversation today. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and give us a little background about who you are, your business, what do you do, how do you help people, and if you'd like a little story about how you got to where you are today, feel free
Yeah,
to take it.
never a little story. Always feels like a long story with lots of twists and turns. But for those of
Totally
you
fine.
who are meeting me for the first time, hi, I'm Laura. I am Canadian. So if you're wondering if I have some interesting pronunciations of words, that's what it is. I am from Canada. I'm a mom of two, so I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. And I believe that you and your business deserve to be seen. And everything that I do in that context is really around supporting early stage female entrepreneurs, a lot of moms get their businesses in front of new audiences through a lot of different ways. So I work with people in various capacities through one-on-one coaching. I have a mastermind. I run events. I have a podcast called This Mother Means Business. I have a community called This Mother Means Business. And really everything that I do is just stems from that core belief that women need to stop hiding and that you need to be seen as who you are fully, and also your business. And so I'm really a strategist by trade in terms of how I found myself here. I started my career in public relations. I have a PR background at a time where brands were just starting to figure out this social media thing. So I'm going to age myself a little bit, and that's fine. But I was the intern back in 2008 that they let manage the Twitter account because brands really didn't have a grasp of like how impactful what social media was going to become. And so I had a really quick upbringing into that space and built digital marketing strategies for some of the biggest brands in the world, brands that you would know about, because I found myself kind of right on the cusp of that season. In 2015, I walked away from my corporate job. I bought a CrossFit gym and I ran a brick and mortar CrossFit gym with my partner for 5 years until 2020 when the world shut down for 2 weeks out of an abundance of caution. And that was the line at the time. We all know how the rest of that went. But I was at that point 8 weeks pregnant with my second child. Gyms here in Canada did not fare particularly well during the pandemic. And I had a decision of, do I want to spend the next 5 to 7 years rebuilding my business back to where it was, or do I want to move on? And so at the end of 2020, I made the decision to close my gym. And at that point, I had a 3-month-old baby and no income. And so I had to figure out how I was going to make it all work. And I went back to the thing that was at the time easiest for me, which is what you do when you have a 3-month-old baby and you're trying to start a business. You start with what's easy.
Yes.
And I started helping business owners use social media better for their businesses. And I'd seen that obviously in running my own brick and mortar gym, and kind of just merged my two lives, right? The space that I was in my corporate job, and then knowing what it was to build a business. And from there, my business has sort of ebbed and flowed over the last almost 4 years as I've sort of built this space and started to have more conversations with moms about what it's really like to build a business while also giving them the strategies that they need to make that happen. So that is a little bit, just a little slice of the things that I do, but that's how I found myself here.
I love it. I love it for so many reasons. First off, because you know how it's kind of fun when you come across people that you're like, oh, of course, of course. I mean, I was doing a whole lot in CrossFit for a really long time, and I actually started my chiropractic clinic attached to a CrossFit gym. So,
Okay, that's
um,
so funny because there is like 2 chiropractic colleges here in Canada.
yeah,
And one of them was my husband. Actually, I met my husband at a CrossFit gym. He owned a CrossFit gym with his brother. And
same.
the MCC, oh, that's hilarious. The Canadian Moral Chiropractic College, I think. And there's been some like professional CrossFit athletes. Pat Vellner, he's a Canadian CrossFit athlete who I know actually because he trained at that same gym. So there's always synergies. The universe puts people in each other's paths in funny ways.
Just love it. I just love it. It's so much fun. But the other reason why I really love it too is because I think sometimes other people probably very similar to me are kind of geared towards like it's going to be very very hard to like start a business on your own or maintain a business while also having a really 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 little one. And I definitely felt that way. So I love that one of the first things you said was you chose the thing that was going to be the easiest. That
Yep.
is like such a mindset shift from like what I normally hear, I feel like. And I love that that's where you went was like, what can I do from the easiest standpoint? What do you think, where do you think that like kind of came from as far as like your thought? I would love to hear your thoughts behind that a little bit more.
I mean, one of the things that I learned in business is sometimes the path of least resistance is the best one.
Yeah.
And I think at that particular moment, like where I was in that season is like, I needed to make money and I wasn't going to, I didn't have time to launch a product. I didn't have the runway to, create something really elaborate. It was like, okay, I'm going to do the thing that is most obvious and right in front of me. And that was that. And I think for anybody that's like looking to start a service-based business or looking to like to start a business, that would be like my question for you is where are you at? Like, do you need to make money now? Or are you going to go to school and become a chiropractor, which takes a whole lot of time?
Yeah.
That, some of it is just like where I was in that season. And at that point, I'd been an entrepreneur for most of 6 years. And so I knew that sometimes you just got to take the path of least resistance. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot about entrepreneurship that's really hard, but that's just where I was. I was like, I know this. I know that this is a thing that people need because I've watched other entrepreneurs really struggle with it. And that's where I began. And then I let it get complicated from there. But simplicity is always the way. I was actually just interviewing a woman on my podcast earlier today who has a multi-million-dollar product-based business and she makes handbags for pumping, actually, like for pumping mothers.
Oh, so
Um,
cool.
yeah, and like this year they have like other bags now. That's what she started with, other bags now. They're launching swimwear this year, doing a lot of cool things. But her business started with one SKU.
Yeah.
Like it never started in this really complex way. And so I think, you know, to answer your question about like what was my mindset around I'm going to do the thing that's easiest, is like that's where you should start. Your business can become complicated later, but when you're beginning, stick with what's easy.
Yep. Yeah, the one thing. Stick with the one thing. That's been my biggest thing is because I'm not I'm kind of all over the place, but
Oh, I can be all over the place too. Like I am learning about human design a little bit, which is a pretty
ooh,
woo.
fun.
I'm a manifesting generator. And
So
so
am
like
I.
this is okay, let's see this tracks. And this is why I'm like, okay, I run my mentorship business. I have a retreat that I run every year. I have a mastermind. I have a community. Oh, by the way, I also have a podcast. Oh, and I have a social media marketing agency that I haven't even told you about yet. And there are days where I'm like, should I just reopen my gym? Like it's crazy. My brain just loves to come up with hundreds of ideas. And then it's like the hard part is distilling what is like the one idea that I should actually stick with.
Yeah, I love seeing mirrors of myself. It's so much fun. I'm like, "Oh, wait, maybe I'm not crazy in this world. Like, this is me."
It's just you, and that's okay.
I love it. So, one of the things that you talked about, I on one of it, like I really loved the episode that you had on pivoting as far as this is literally the conversation really that we're having, right? Is like 2020 happened, and then you were like, okay, pivot. Where do we need to go from here? And I loved how on your podcast, one of the things that you talked about was just kind of like stepping back and being like, okay, what is it that I need to do here? And one of the things too that I really recognized in myself, and I hear a lot from moms, is that when they get into that postpartum phase, it doesn't matter necessarily how much preparation they think they have done or what they think they might want to do from pregnancy into postpartum. A lot of the times when you get into that space, everything changes and there's sometimes a lot of surprises that then happen. Like you thought you were going to go back to work, but then you're like, ooh, like I don't want to go back to work. Or for some, they thought maybe they would be the person who wanted to stay at home, but they really want to go back to work. um do you have any experience as far as like kind of helping people determine what they might want to do, or be in that, be open to making that pivot.
Yeah, it's wild how your perspective changes. And
Yeah.
it's so funny because I can look back at like past versions of myself, like my pre-motherhood self and the things that I prioritize and the things that were important. And I do it sometimes too secretly in the online space where, people that I know are pregnant with their first kid, they're focused on this one thing. And you just kind of like sit back and you're like, I hate to like just you wait someone, but it's really interesting to watch them then have their child and then experience this like wild desire for change. And, to answer your question around like, how do I support people? I think the first one is like really just encouraging people to tap into what's true for them, because it can be this really massive shift in like everything that you thought that you knew, everything that you thought was important for you, like goes out the window, but you're still holding on to those things because that's the expectation that you've created for yourself, or maybe even other people have created. And so a lot of it is, tapping into what's actually your story and the thing that you actually want, free of other people's perspectives. One of the things I ask my clients sometimes is when we're talking through these things is like, whose story is that?
Yeah.
Who's
Is that yours, or is it from the external world somewhere?
Yeah, and whose voice is that? Like, who are you hearing when you say that? Like I have a client whose mother is particularly hard on her, and
Mm.
her mother will come over and say, your house is a mess or whatever. This woman runs a multi six-figure agency, has two children, like is super successful. And yet it's like, I'm a bad mom because my house is dirty. And it's like, whose voice is that? And so I think some of it is just like releasing that expectation and being able to know that like you can create whatever you want in the world, but it starts with really understanding for yourself, what is it that you want?
Right. Right. I think that's super interesting on the filter side of it. It's just when I first thing that came to mind there with that client is like, for that client's mom, perhaps the way that she sees like being success is through the filter of having like a clean house, whereas her daughter has multi, six-figure business. It's a different filter. That's super interesting. But yes, it's that was one thing that came to my mind this morning that I was like, I feel like this is something that needs to be said, which is you get to decide what you want to do, and listening to that voice is like the best thing. I think sometimes, and I know for me, like I realized I did not want to go back to chiropractic, and I have been thinking about it periodically, like, oh, what would it be like if I like opened up a clinic again or went into that space? But there is like a very strong feeling in me that is like, no, I do not want to do that. And I've been paying a close attention to that voice, but it would be so easy to be like, "Well, but if I did, then, all of these things, and maybe this would happen, and maybe this would happen." But I've learned to really respect what that voice has to say, but I think a lot of people will go back to work because 'cause they'll think of money, they need to bring income in, they need to do all these things, um, and it just begs to question, where is it possible that if you were to stay home, or if you were to go back to work and follow that voice, that it could work out in a different way? Maybe not the way that you would like for it to be, but is there a possibility that it could work out in the way that it's meant to be if you were to listen to that voice? And I think we so often don't listen to those things. And then we kind of end up in places where we're like, I don't understand why I don't feel well, or I don't understand why nothing's working. It's because
And
there's.
I subscribe to what was prescribed for me most of my life.
Mhm.
So you go to school, you get a job, you work for somebody else until you retire, and maybe if you win the lottery, you get a pension somewhere in there. Like
Yeah.
that's what I was told that my life was supposed to be. And I'm the first entrepreneur in my family, and so for me, I'm in a family of lawyers and business people, and doctors, and that's just what you did.
Yeah.
And I'm the first one to have been like, actually, that's not for me. And so that's been a big part of it, right? And I think a lot of us do that. We subscribe to what's prescribed, what the universe, what they, whoever they are,
Hmm.
say that we need to be doing. And it's just not the case. And, I think as a mom, like if we look at it through that lens, there's a lot of responsibility that comes there, right? And so sometimes it's easier said than done to be like, well, I'm just gonna quit my corporate job and do something else. It's like, well, you would have mortgages to pay, we may have
Yeah,
daycare to
that's a
pay.
lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. And one of the questions that people ask me a lot is like, how did I make the jump from my corporate career into entrepreneurship? And I don't know that I'm that well equipped to answer that
Yeah.
because at the time I was in my mid 20s.
Yep.
I was very fiscally responsible in my 20s. And so I had a lot of money saved up. I owned the place that I lived. I had a partner with a union job who is now my husband, and I didn't have any children. Like I didn't have that same level of responsibility. Like, and I knew that I could go back and get a marketing job. I gave myself a year. If I can't figure this out in a year, I'll go back and I'll get a job in marketing. It'll be fine. But there's a story that a mentor of mine, her name is Jessica DeRose, tells. And it's a story of for her when she made the pivot from her job as a teacher
Mhm.
to her online business. And, she made this pivot without kids either. But there's a piece of the story that I think really stands out. And the story that she tells is that she was driving in her car, listening to the radio, and it was a podcast interview or a radio interview. And this person was having a conversation very similar about someone looking to make a pivot. And the interviewer asks the individual, okay, so tell me about like if it doesn't work out, what's the worst case? What's the worst thing that can happen? And the same
Mhm.
way that I just said to you, I just go back and get a job in marketing. And this woman said, I'll just go back and, get a job in what I'm doing now. And the interviewer asked her, well, how does it feel to be living your worst case scenario right now?
Yeah.
And so that is a story that like resonates with me a lot of the time. And my Jessica tells the story as like the moment for her where she was like, whoa, okay, this
Mhm.
has to change. And it's never black and white, right? There's always, when we talk about being in a
Yeah.
season where you have kids and you have mortgage, you have responsibility, it's never black and white. But the thing that I always tell a person that's looking to make a pivot, make a change is like, do you have the facts? Right? Have you started to map this out for yourself in terms of like what it would actually look like? I met a woman at an event that I was at a couple months ago, and she similar, like as a teacher, wanted to start her own daycare, her own school. It was
Mm.
this conversation about it. And she's like, like I want to do it, but I know there's a market for it. I don't, it just feels like a really big change. I was like, okay, well, have you looked at like spaces in your area to see like what's available? Well, no. Have you figured out like how much money, how many kids you need to have in order to, you know, be
Mhm.
profitable?
Yep.
Have you looked at like, do you know how much it would cost to pay an ECE? And so, she's standing at this being like, I can't do it. I want to, but I can't. It's like, well, just start getting the information, right? You need, if you're going to make a leap, you're going to make a change. It starts with getting the information, especially if we're talking about like heading into entrepreneurship. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
what does that road actually look like? And start finding that out for yourself so that you can then make an educated guess. So many people get stuck in this like, I want to make a change. I have this dream and I want to start my business. I want to do this thing. And it's like, have you ever like peeked under the rug there and actually started to like look at what that would be? And so I
Yeah.
think if more people did that, they'd experience a lot more freedom and probably more people would actually make the pivot.
Yeah, I agree. I also think too that we sometimes don't we kind of like squash those dreams of like, oh, that's just not even something that's possible for me. Um, and especially too, I think on the side of like having kids, that was one thing for me that I prior to getting pregnant and starting to have a family, I was like, but, like, so many people don't if I was watching everybody else's stories of, like, they give up all of these things. That's how I was seeing it, right? It's through this lens of, like, they were giving up all of their lives and their dreams and their stuff to have kids, and I was seeing that from the outside, and I was like, I don't like that," you know? But it's interesting though, getting to see it on the flip side and definitely seeing how you can actually hold your dreams and you can live and create the life that you want in motherhood. It's just taking the steps, just like you mentioned. And that was one of the things, like my business completely came to a halt when I had my daughter, which was unexpected. That was not intentional. But it's been very cool to get to see the steps that I've taken to get it back up and running again. It were the same exact steps I took when I started.
Yeah.
Literally the same exact things. And so that's been really cool for me. It's the same thing as what you're saying here. It's just start looking at what do you need to do in order to potentially bring this dream to life so that you actually know whether it's possible or not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just this esoteric thing that's like, I don't know if I could or not, but have you actually ever like tried? Have you ever looked at what that would be? So my next question would be for the people uh who are now on the flip side of being in business as an entrepreneur that are moms and are trying to figure out like how to manage both. I know for me, like in the beginning, like that 3 to 4 month stage was actually like quite easy because she slept all the freaking time. I mean, people were like, "How are you doing it?" And I was like, "How are you not doing it?" I was like, "This is easy." But now she's like 8 months tomorrow, and she does not sleep as much. And I'm
Mm,
like, "Whew, where do I find the time?" Do you have any tips or ways that you help, like, coach your clients through that phase of, like,
yeah.
where how do you manage both sides?
8 months is actually when motherhood started getting fun for me. So
It is
I
fun. This is my favorite stage. I
months
will
is
say that. I'm loving it.
they're really busy. And I will say, like, I'm talking about my first round of motherhood. I really struggled in my postpartum window. And I talked about that on actually the second episode of my podcast. Really
Mhm,
just my whole experience with becoming a mom and as an entrepreneur and the
mhm,
pain that I put myself through truly. But yeah, 8 months is when things get really fun. I would say like there's a couple things. So entrepreneurship as a mom is different in every season. And my kids are 7, my daughter just turned 7, and I have a 3-year-old. And I would say in the last couple of months, I could feel this like shift into a different season of motherhood. I'm not
mhm.
dealing with naps anymore. I'm not dealing with diapers. My 3-year-old sleeps in a diaper overnight, but like I'm not in that season. I'm not dealing with tantrums really. Like we're actually skiing as a family and all 4 of us were on a chairlift. And I was like, whoa, this
Mhm.
is crazy. We have turned the corner. We can go places and we're not having to bring cribs or pack and plays. It's just like
Right.
you sleep in the bed. And so I'm definitely in this new season of motherhood. But I would say to anyone that's in this season where, your kids, you're feeling this pull, right? You want to build your business, but your baby also needs you so much.
Yeah.
There's a couple pieces to it, and it is nuanced. And my approach might not be someone else's approach, but one of the things that I've learned to actually drop is guilt. So I don't feel mom guilt ever.
Yep. Yep.
And that's a weird thing because I think inherently as moms, it's like you're supposed to feel guilty. If you don't feel guilty about doing things for yourself, you're a bad mom. And for me, I had to realize about myself that I am not a good mom. I am not a present mom. I am distracted. I am not the mom that I want to be for my children if I am with them 100% of the time,
Yeah.
if I don't do the things that I need to do for myself. And I love my business. I love the work that I do. I'm super passionate about it, and I will never let motherhood be an excuse for why I can't achieve my dreams. And so I know that when I'm traveling or if I have to put my kid on an iPad for half an hour because I have to get on a call, that like that is the thing that I need to be doing at that moment so that I can be 100% present with them later. And so that's been a really powerful mindset shift for me that has
Mhm.
taken some time, but there is no reason for me to feel guilty, but doesn't mean I don't miss them, right? There's a big difference. You're like, oh, I miss my kids. I wish I was there, but I don't feel guilty. I don't feel bad about it. because what I'm doing is trying to give them an example of what their life could look like. Because my parents weren't entrepreneurs. I didn't know that was an option for me.
Sure.
But we create a life for them that allows them to do whatever that they desire in the future. And so there's that piece of it that is big for me, is that mindset piece. And then on the flip side, there's also this piece in knowing that you have to run your business differently as a mom. It's just a whole different game. And I think moms become wildly efficient. Like I'm a far more efficient
Yeah.
business owner than I ever was before I had children. Is you become this wildly efficient, but you really do have to do it differently. And so for me, that looks like filtering my sources, right? Like being careful about who I'm taking information from,
Yep.
not taking productivity tips from, 20 something childless men, for example.
A thousand
Really,
percent.
like just looking at it through the lens of like, okay, what's doable for me in this season? And being okay with that and knowing that every season is going to be different. So I realize that's a lot of things, but I
No,
could
it's
talk about
amazing.
it
I
first.
actually wanted to highlight, there was a point where I was like, I recognized, I was like, oh, do I feel guilty for not feeling guilty?
No, don't feel guilty for not feeling guilty. Like,
Yeah, I caught myself there for a minute because one of the things that I do inside of one of my courses is I help moms actually process the emotion of guilt so that then they can release mom guilt because it doesn't serve us at all, especially too when I recognized I recognized the first time that I had my mom here to help, and this was like, I mean, early on. It was like 3 or 4 months. Well, she was here earlier than that, but like for my business specifically, I was like starting to work and just trying to figure out how to do all the things. And I recognized when I got done with all of my things, when I went back to then hang out with my kiddo the rest of the day, I was like, "Whoa, like this feels better. Like I got a break. I got like I'm in a new headspace. I'm not feeling like, I've been with this kid all day long, and I recognized I was like, "Oh, there's something there that I'm going to pay attention to." So I wanted to put in my experience with that as well because I found that to be very true for me as well. I was like, I need to have my outlets. If I don't do this and take care of myself, I'm not going to be the best mom that I can be. And I love that. I love that shift.
yeah, and it took me some time. I think that's an important thing I
Oh, it
want. And
takes, yeah, yeah.
like it took me like you figured that out at 8 months. I was probably my daughter was probably 2.5 when
Okay.
I got like, it took me some time, right? And because I think some of it, it's like you're supposed to feel guilty,
Yeah, right.
And
Right.
it's you're kind of set up that way that it's
Mhm.
like mom's supposed to be at home and like, oh, like shouldn't you be with your kids? Weren't you just away? Stuff like that, right? Like it is the system, whatever you want to call it, is set up in a way that is almost designed to make you feel guilty. And it took me a lot of time to like release that and to be like, no, I'm not going to subscribe to that definition. And I don't feel guilty about being guilty because I was a whole ass human before I became a mom,
Yep.
right? I was a whole, very fulfilled, very happy, functioning human with wants and needs and desires and passions and hobbies and all of the things. And being a mom, becoming a mom, killed that for like a minute because I let it. And by a minute, I mean like probably the first year. I allowed it to,
Sure.
but I'm not going to allow that to anymore. Becoming a mom is like just another thing that I've added on to the list of things that I love and enjoy. And, I am an entrepreneur and I have the pleasure of being able to, take my kids to school every day and pick them up. And if I want to volunteer, like it's given me all that space to do that. And I'm also really passionate about the work that I do and the ways that I get to use my brain and come and be on podcasts like this and have these really important conversations. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, for me, like I don't feel guilty about it because I was a whole person before. And so I still get to be that person now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm here with you for sure. Also too, I feel like entrepreneurship gives you the potential or the opportunity to be around a lot for your
Yeah.
kids and be at home or present with them more than if you were to maybe go and work somewhere else as well. So there's like, yes, you're going to be dealing with some things and maybe they will be like on iPads or watching TV or doing something to keep them entertained while you do your thing, but then you're also with them more often throughout the day than you would be otherwise. So there's
Totally.
the flip side.
My last corporate job was for a German luxury automotive company. I was doing all their digital marketing and digital media. If I
Mhm.
were to still be at that job, I would be going to Germany once a year for 2 weeks. I would be going to events, parties, conferences, traveling on a regular basis, right? I mean, I would be commuting probably too. I live in the suburbs. And so there's all of that, right?
Right.
Um, and that's there's nothing wrong with that, anyone that's doing that. It's just that when I think about, me feeling guilty for, taking a couple of days and going to a mastermind a handful of times a year, or, my daughter's school ends at 3 and sometimes I've got or 3:20 and sometimes I have like a 3:30 call. And frankly, she actually loves that she gets to be on her iPad and watch YouTube to unwind a
Yeah.
little bit of the day while mom takes a 30-minute call before we go pick up her brother from daycare. I don't feel bad about those things. Like, it's fine. When my son's home, then they have my is that every day? No, but sometimes it just is. And
Right.
I don't feel bad about it. Like, that's just our life and this is what we're building and we're all on board over here.
Yeah, I read a quote from, oh, it was the account Mother Untitled, and one of the things that she said was, it doesn't matter really what you do, it's just if you do, like, what makes you happy, your kids will also be happy with that in the context of, like, if you choose to be an entrepreneur, or if you choose to go back to work, or if you choose to stay home, or if you choose to, take a pause in your career, in that gap, it's your kids will be happy with what you decide to do. And I've seen stories now of also a mentor of mine, same thing, her daughter was like, I think she maybe was questioning like mom works a lot. But then I think they came to like a vacation or a spring break or something like that, and they were able to just go do what the idea was that they wanted to go do. And she was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is cool that you get to, have run your own business and you kind of get to do it the way you want to do it. And for her daughter, that was a very big like aha moment of like, oh, this is different than most. And so I thought
Yeah.
that was really cool.
The other piece for me that, is really important is I want my daughter to see that motherhood can look however she wants it to look. And I
Yeah,
think about
that's right there.
part
Hmm.
of why I struggled so much in my first year of entrepreneurship is because I saw the version of motherhood that I witnessed growing up was not a version of motherhood that I would have enjoyed. My mother martyred herself for her 3 children. She stayed at home, which was fine. That was her choice. But I remember going like shopping and she'd buy us clothes and she never did anything for herself. She was
Hmm.
taxied us around. She, served dinner, made dinner every night, cleaned up, like did all of the things that frankly I can't stand. Like, I don't want to do any of that stuff. And so like the definition of motherhood that I saw was a person that really sacrificed everything for being a mom. And I don't think that, if I were to ask her, and I have, she would say, no, like it was my choice. It's what I wanted. But I think deep down, I think she probably squashed a lot of ambition. And it was part of why I struggled with motherhood at first, is because I was like, I guess this is how it's supposed to look. And so I want my daughter to know that it can look however she wants it to look.
Right.
You don't have to stay at home if you don't want to. If you want to, cool, do that. If you have the means to do that, great. You want to build a business? I mean, my daughter artwork is coming home. We just finished school for the year and
Yeah.
got- getting all the work coming home. And she's in French immersion school here in Canada. It's not atypical. So her school's in French, and my French is okay. It's not great, but I'm starting to see these things coming home. And one of the pieces of art that she created, and I sobbed when I saw this, but it was
Mm.
like, it was like what you're doing in the future. And she's like, I'm an artist. I work for, the fill in the blank myself. And like, I help whoever. And it was like continuing on. But like when I was a kid, it was not I work for myself. It was I work at I'm a lawyer, like it was just like I'm an artist and I work for myself was the art that was what came home. And I was like, man, that's cool. Like I just sobbed because it was like, gosh, like, okay, you're doing, it's working. You're doing the right things. Is like to
Yeah.
know that she knows that that's an option is
Yep.
amazing.
Mm, I love it. I love it. That's actually why I created a course that I did on that's again, it's another thing. Like I created 3 courses this year and my daughter's 8 months old.
Wow,
Like,
amazing.
holy smokes. I never would have thought I would have done that. But one of the things I created was creating the motherhood that you want and creating the motherhood of your dreams because I recognized how many moms don't do that because of these patterns that we grew up with as
Yeah,
the example. And I realized for myself, I was like, I'm not here for that. I'm just not. So I went out and got the tools that I needed in order to work on my own stories, to work on those old programs, to work on those things,
yeah,
to work on these beliefs. Can we make it a little bit easier? Can we release guilt? Can we do those things? Just because I realized like it is possible to create a motherhood that doesn't have those things. And I felt not only for myself that I wanted that, but I wanted that experience for my daughter.
yeah,
So then now I've created it into a course for moms because I just see it as something that is really possible and also very important for future generations. And I think personally, I think they deserve it. Anyway, I love it. Um, is there anything else that you would like to, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to include or talk about before we talk about the programs and things that you have going on right now?
no, I don't think so. I mean, and maybe just the one thing I would add is, I love that you went and got the tools and learned the things. I will say that, when I'm sitting here and talking, like all of this stuff, I learned the hard way. Like I had to make myself a puddle on the floor, like I was the person that was very broken because I, didn't do all these things. I put my business first. I put myself last. And like I really truly had to learn the hard way. And I think that like if anything that you have taken out from listening to this episode is like, please don't learn the hard way.
Yeah,
That's the way that it's been. I broke my leg actually in March of this year.
I saw that.
It's been an insane, crazy year. That's like a whole other podcast episode. But for me, like there's the takeaway for me from that is like breaking my leg brought up a lot of things that I had thought that I had like cleared that I really hadn't.
Yeah.
Um, and so the takeaway for me was like, oh, if you don't slow down, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't like really slow down and have a look at things, like the universe might break your leg,
Yeah.
like someone's come in and like do that. And so my message for people out of breaking my leg, and I have a podcast episode coming out on this, is like, please take the rest before the universe breaks your leg. Like, don't do it the way that I did it. And so sometimes I feel like that's kind of my mission on this earth is to let these crazy things happen and then be the person that talks about it. But I love that you're doing what you're doing, and I wish that I had that, several
Yeah.
years.
Okay. Last thing before because you just brought up a whole, and I'm actually just about to record a podcast on that as well, because one of the things I've been talking about with a lot of people is when I say that of like slowing down and resting and take the breaks that you need, people immediately go to the like, but who else is going to do all of the stuff? Like, who else is going to do the things if I don't do all of the stuff, right? And
Yeah.
I just immediately am like, but there's so many other possibilities of like what's available there, and yes, all that stuff is still going to be there, but what happens is if you're being called to like take the rest and take the break and you don't do it, being a functional medicine practitioner and a physician, one of the things that happens is you break your leg or you get a chronic illness of some type because the body is literally like, oh, you don't want to slow down, cool, I'm gonna force you to do it, and then
My
now you're
dear.
dealing with something worse.
Yeah, I mean, I truly, if you'd asked me before I broke my leg, like I would have told you that I asked for help and that I'm well supported and that I'm doing the things. And then I fell off my bike.
Right. That's
I couldn't drive. I had 2 small children, had to work out the logistics.
yeah.
And now I have a whole army of people that will help me and that I will ask for help and can ask for help and have learned so many things. So I actually recorded a full podcast episode on this because I remember lying on the ground. I fell off on a horse onto a road, lying on the
Oof.
middle of the road and being like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't, but there's always lessons on the other side.
Yeah, and that's not to say too, actually, that just brought a thought to my mind. That's not to say too that like we're always trying to avoid the broken legs or we're always trying to avoid the things because you'll never be able to do that. But also those lessons are, I think you talk about this a lot, like you learn the hard way, but then so that you can teach other people to not I think that's a very similar thing that probably you and I both have. But yeah, we're not trying to necessarily avoid all of those things because it's in those lessons that we often learn like, oh, well, now I have all of this community or all of this support,
Yes.
which is very good for the next question, which is you have built a community. You also have retreats coming up. Talk a little bit about those so that if people are just like loving this and they would like to find you, tell them how they can find you and work with you and what you have coming up.
Yeah, so many things. It's funny. I never really got into this space thinking like I'm gonna work with moms, but it's just happened. It's just, there's
Yeah.
just a different conversation. This like I think entrepreneurship has a tendency to be really lonely, and then you
Mhm.
throw motherhood onto it, it's extra lonely because you can't really relate to other entrepreneurs that don't have kids, and you definitely can't relate to other moms that don't have businesses.
Right.
So there's this piece of it that's like okay, I don't know where to find my people. And I have been so intentional over the last few years of finding my own people myself. And
Yeah.
then I meet these people, I'm like, oh, this person needs to meet this person. And that there's this really like this piece of connection. And I've unintentionally become a super connector in a lot of ways. And so I launched my
Nice.
podcast, This Mother Means Business, at the beginning of last year. And in May of this year, I officially created this Mother Means Business community, which is a space for entrepreneurial mothers who are feeling some of that like I don't really fit in with the other entrepreneurs and I don't really fit in with the moms. I need to find my people to come together and support each other. And it's an incredible virtual community. I've got big goals for it to become an in-person community down the road. But right now we're virtual. We do a monthly mastermind call. We do 2 networking calls a month. And then we also bring in an expert on just something that's going to be supportive. Our next couple of experts earlier this week, we had someone come in that's a nutritionist just to talk about food because like, let's be
So
honest,
good.
toast crusts is not food. It's not a meal. You cannot eat your child's leftovers. That's not a meal.
Mhm.
Next month, we've got someone coming in talking about digital ads, and then we're doing breath work the month after. So it's really a mix of helping you build your skills in both business and in life. So
Love
that's
it.
This Mother Means Business. If you want to learn more about my podcast, This Mother Means Business, or the community, you can check it out at thismothermeansbusiness.com. And then I also have my retreat, which is October 2nd to 4th here in Canada. And yes, if you're in the US and listening, people fly in. So if you've never been to Canada, dust off your passport. Let's go. It is a retreat for mom entrepreneurs. You do have to be a mom to attend. The number of DMs that I get from people that are saying, I have never wanted to be a mom more than I do at this moment.
Just so
Um,
they can join the retreat.
that's so they can come to the retreat. But the retreat is this really beautiful mix of relaxation. Day one, we just kind of like slow down and integrate because most of us are just like running really fast in a lot of different directions at once. And so the retreat exists as an invitation for you to slow
Not.
down.
Yeah. Mhm. Love it.
We have some fun, we have some integration. We do work on your business. There are masterminding components, but I have some incredible practitioners coming in to dive into wellness. We do a photo shoot session. We have a VIP chef coming in, a little bit of a mix of personal development, a little mix of masterminding, and a whole lot of rest. Like go to bed early, get some sleep, enjoy it. We're on actually this year, we change the location every year. This year we're in a 14,000 square foot log mansion,
Mm.
5 private acres on the water here in Canada. So dust off your passport and send me a DM at it's Laura Sinclair on Instagram, or you can go to laura-sinclair.com.
Amazing. We'll have all those links in the show notes as well, for everyone. That sounds awesome. Like,
Is honestly I love everything that I do. Truly, I
yeah,
wouldn't do it. But the
okay.
retreat is like this really, it's something different. There's something different about it. It's just really special. I am a person that grew up in very competitive environments. I'm the middle child of 3 girls, played a lot of sport,
Oh,
struggled with female friendships for a
man,
long time.
man.
And so the retreat is just this like really beautiful opportunity to like be in support around other like with other really powerful moms doing really cool things, and to really find this really cool sisterhood for 3 days. So love it.
Amazing.
It is truly my favorite thing on my calendar every year.
Love it. I love it. Oh, thank you, Laura, so much for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was amazing. I will, for everyone listening, I'll have all the things to find you in the show notes. And awesome. Well, we'll see all of you for the next episode. Take care.